thank you all very much for showing up. Boy, this is weird. I actually gave a talk once to a hit refresh, Brian. I don't want to do that. I actually gave a talk to a completely empty room once. It was supposed to be my talk was at some larger conference, and it was supposed to be a prize for like the high school that submitted the best science project. Well, there was some storm or a school bus problem or something. That school ended up not coming. So they said, give the talk anyway, because we're going to stream it to all the other classrooms who entered the contest. So I gave a talk to a completely empty room. There was a camera guy in the back of the room. He had to leave, so we just left the camera running. It was the weirdest thing. And then later they told me there was a problem with the streaming software, and it didn't go to anyone. So nobody saw it at all. So I kind of feel that this is the opposite of that. I feel I'm not giving a talk, but everyone's hearing me anyway. Okay. So ask me anything on the UFO movie. A bunch of people sent me questions earlier, and so I've got these written down, and I'm just going to go through these. I've got someone who is looking at the comments. So if you do have a question, go ahead and post it in the comments. The ones that are good, he's gonna text them to me. So I'll get to those when I get through the ones that are pre-done. So I am putting the movie out on YouTube on Friday, and the reason for this is, although the movie was officially released back in August, and it's been available for people to rent on Vimeo, that's not a great solution. You have to you have to rent it on a computer or a mobile device. They don't have a TV app anymore, and then you have to cast it to your TV, which is, I think, one too many hoops to make people jump through. So it's not a great solution. So it's being Film Hub is the distributor for the film, and they have not gotten it anywhere. A lot of this has to do with changes in the way film distribution works for independent film distributors. It's been a really rough couple of years for that. The classic movie studios are trying to wrest control back from the independents. And so they're doing things like filling all of the advertising supported services like Tubi with their entire back catalogs of 10,000 movies. So an independent film is just going to be buried, hopelessly buried. No one will ever be able to see it. So it is rougher and rougher and rougher for independents. So my thing was, I said, okay, if I don't get any kind of a decent distribution where people at least can see the darn thing by the end of the year, I'm just going to throw it on YouTube. So I'm just throwing it on YouTube, and that's coming out tomorrow. There was one, not tomorrow, Friday. There was one service that I had an agreement with. They had some exclusive YouTube thing until the end of the week, and Friday is the first day I can do this without being clear of that contract. So that's why it's Friday. But anyway, let's go ahead and dive into your questions. First one, we have a question from Jeff. What would you instantly record if you found yourself in a UFO situation? What would you write down? What would you force yourself to notice? What would you film so as to set a baseline by which the UFO's size, distance, brightness could be determined, etc.? Okay, great question, and this is something that I do think about. When, let's say me or anyone else sees a UFO and we're able to get some camera footage or whatever of it, if it's going to get solved, it's going to get solved by the team at Metabunk. And if you follow Metabunk, metabunk.com or .org, one of those, you can see their process for solving these things. There are guys there who will take the location of the camera, and they will look at the backgrounds, and they will get into mapping databases, match it exactly. They'll figure out the angle of the camera, where it was pointing. We will know what stars were in the sky. We will know what airplanes were in the sky because of public databases like FlightAware, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that data is available. So you don't need to do much. If I saw a UFO, I would have my iPhone almost certainly. I would almost certainly not have any other camera. But that's fine because the iPhone, it keeps the location data. So we would know exactly where I was standing when I took the video. And at that point, all you need to do is just take your film, hold it as steady as you can and get as good quality as you can. Maybe talk about while you're filming, talk about what you're seeing, what the conditions are, whether there's wind, with the temperature, rain, anything you can think of, any potential reflections or light sources that are around you. And I think if you did that, you'd have a pretty good, strong chance of it getting identified by Metabunk. Or, hey, William Runner says, I'm a Metabunker. Rob Palmer says, yay for Mick West's project. Mick West says he considers himself the curator of a large team of talented amateur experts at Metabunk. He says that in the movie. So that's my answer for Jeff. That's what I would do. Really, you just need to use a camera that has the location data and give as much information as you can and let the pros take it from there. Okay, question from Rob, and I think this is the same Rob. In my experience, UFO true believers love to express their extreme anger at anyone who disagrees with their point of view. Oh, really? Yes, I've heard this. Often saying that they are part of the conspiracy to cover up the truth. Boy, I've heard that too. This is exemplified looking at the YouTube comments on any Mick West UFO analysis. Yeah, there's Mick again. Mick's name will probably pop up a lot today. So despite its gentle approach in this regard, I presume your film has been no exception. Can you give an example of the most angry responses that have been posted anywhere against it? Well, again, this has got to go back to the fact that the film has had an extremely limited release so far. I can't say that there's been any negative response. Actually, that's not true. People have gotten their friends to watch it, and the friends sent them some comments. I've had comments have been emailed back to me. I've seen one or two have been posted online as reviews. They weren't really angry. They were just kind of, they're very typically dismissive of the skeptical perspective. Typically, they ignore the 90% of the movie that's teaching astronomy and astrophysics and showing that these things are not alien spaceships. Whatever they might be, they're not that. And instead, they look at the segments where I talk about, there's about 5 or 6 actual UFO cases that we talk about in the film from the perspective of why this is terrible evidence and why we need good evidence if we're going to break the status quo and claim that aliens are visiting the Earth. And the comments that I've seen, they usually focus on those parts of the film and say that, I'm being closed-minded, I'm not accepting the fact that pilots are infallible, and if you're in the Navy, you're immune from strange beliefs, and anything you see that you don't understand is an alien. I'm a pseudo-skeptic, that kind of thing. It's very much the typical stuff that we hear. In fact, on my Substack yesterday was top 10 things that UFO skeptics hear from these folks. briandunning.substack.com. Subscribe today. Okay, question from Jack. What is your family life like, and how involved is your family with your work? Well, I don't think I've ever been asked that before. And it's a great question. I am very, very, very fortunate in my family life. Not only that my family gives me the freedom to do this job, which a lot of people can say, but that everyone in my family is actually a useful contributor in some way. My daughter is our in-house astronomer and astrophysicist. She answers questions for me all the time. My son is the in-house geologist. He answers questions for me on geology, geophysics, and stuff all the time. And my wife is probably the most useful. She is with her master's in psychology, and she's a LMFT by profession. And we often talk about the psychology of certain cases. So none of them are employees of Skeptoid or anything, but I lean on all of them quite frequently whenever something comes up that's in their subject area. Sometimes I give them episodes to tech edit and fact check. They're great. So I'm singularly fortunate in having such a wonderful household full of smart people. And I get to be the dumbest guy in the house and I get to get away with it. And that's thanks to them. Question from Terry. I often use Stanley Milgram and Solomon Asch's experiments into obedience to authority figures, and conformity under peer pressure to illustrate that, contrary to popular belief, the majority of Americans do what they're told and are afraid of behaving differently from their peers. Have these experiments continued to be valid since they were conducted in the 50s? Yeah, so if you don't know these experiments, one of these is the Asch conformity effect. And I had a live show that I used to do called Your Brain Sucks. Boy, there was a moment, huh? I gotta edit that clip out of here. So if your brain sucks and you can't remember things, the Asch conformity effect is something I did in the show, which is you've got a room full of people who are all in on it, and one person who is the only test subject, and he's unaware that everyone else isn't also a test subject, and they all answer questions wrong. And he's the only guy going, what is wrong with all you people? Basically, it's putting peer pressure on him to start answering questions wrong, and he usually does. That's the Asch conformity effect. The Milgram shock experiment had to do with I can't remember exactly how it was set up. I think what you got is you've got a professor asking students questions, kind of like in Ghostbusters, Bill Murray was doing this. And if they got the question wrong, he gives them an electric shock. But in this case, the student is in on it, and he's not actually getting shocked, he's pretending. And the person playing the role of the professor is the test subject. And they're trying to see, is he going to continue giving shocks to this person? And what they found was that if responsibility is taken away from him and put on someone else's shoulders, e.g., he is told to shock the student, then he'll go ahead and do it without any problem. And he'll turn the volume up and shock him harder. So those are two, the Asch conformity effect and the Milgram shock experiment. Have these been continued to be valid since they were conducted in the 50s? I as far as I know, but I have not looked into that, so don't quote me on that. But what Terry's getting at here, I think, is the peer pressure and things that cause people to go along with everyone else, even if they don't think the UFO is weird. Oh, there's a bunch of people outside. Look, there's a light in the sky. And if someone doesn't see it, they're going to go, oh, yeah, I see it too. Peer pressure. No one wants to be the one weird person who doesn't see it. That is absolutely an effect in some of the famous UFO cases, such as the Westall UFO from Australia in 1966, a whole schoolyard of kids. Only a few kids saw this thing, and I think one teacher, again, I did an episode on this, but it was years ago. I don't remember the specifics. But once other people in the schoolyard heard that, oh yeah, they saw this, they all said, oh yeah, I saw it too. Of course, I'm no dummy. If everyone else saw it, then of course I saw it too. So it kind of became what we call the bandwagon effect. It's basically peer pressure. So yeah, that absolutely plays a role in some UFO cases. Question from Roger. This is my Ask Me Anything, so I get to drink my beer. My favorite beer is actually, this is my second favorite beer. This is the Vicious Mosquito from Sun River Brewing. Number one for me in Oregon right now is the Vortex IPA from Fort George in Astoria, Oregon. So pardon me. Roger asks, hi, Brian. Some time ago, I watched some of the early sections of the movie. I was very impressed with the guy who refuted all the crazy stuff about the Navy pilots' videos and radar feeds. Talking about Mick West's segment. Yes, best part of the film. The stuff that even thinking people seemed to want to believe. The question is, did anyone in government or the scientific community ever comment or agree that there are good, reasonable explanations for those videos? It bothers me that I've heard no one mention it or agree or disagree. So I am not on top as on top of this as some other people are. So I heard Scott Bray once mention, and clearly he was referring to Mick West's analysis. And again, Mick will be the first one to tell you he's curating an analysis that was crowdfunded by many people at Metabunk. and he kind of puts it all together into a video. Scott Bray, who at the time was the, I don't know, I don't remember. He was the head of one of these, the Navy UFO Committee, or what, one of these things that's come and gone a million times. He said something that indicated clearly he had watched it and he did understand what was going on. Other than that, I don't know. Probably some others. I would hope some others. About 2 years ago, I actually did a little bit of investigative questioning, talking to people I know, seeing if there was any way that I could put together a team of people, go to Washington and give a presentation to anyone in Congress who was willing to listen, and try and reach some of these people and saying, hey, there's other explanations besides alien visits. It was clear that I wasn't going to get anywhere with that. I am no Washington insider, obviously, so nothing happened with that. But I agree with you. It bothers me that it's not wider known. But I believe it will be, and that's part of the reason I made this movie. And now it's on YouTube. Hopefully someone will show it. Question from Brenda, who asks, who are they? This is the #1 FAQ on the movie. The UFO movie, they don't want you to see. And on the website for the movie, the UFO.movie, there is an FAQ page, and it does answer this. It's the first answer. And basically, it's they are the people who profit from the public not having any good science literacy on this question. And that's basically the people at Discovery Channel, History Channel, Nat Geo, all of these TV networks that are making all of this fictional programming, promoting alien visitation as a real accepted thing. The more people who understand that that's all just nonsense and fiction, the less successful their programming will be. So there actually are people who have an interest in you not watching this film. So although the title is largely tongue-in-cheek, it actually is true. There are people who would rather you not understand science. Question from Neil. Hi, Neil. Is there any scientific basis for the theory that UFOs / entities / etc. could be warping in from different dimensions or a parallel universe? I answer this question the same as I answer, are we living in a simulation? These are thought experiments. These are not observations. There are no observations that indicate we're living in a simulation. We can think about it and we can say, hey, the world is consistent with we're living in a simulation because of this, this, and that. But you're talking about philosophy and thought experiments. You're not talking about science. Science starts with an observation. There are no observations that indicate we have been visited by aliens who warped in from another dimension. If there were such observations, then we could start forming theory around it, but there aren't. So, yeah, that's my answer, Neil. It's basically no. There is no scientific basis for that theory. Doesn't mean it's impossible, since we don't seem to have any evidence or any reason to think this has ever happened. It seems unlikely, but it's outside of science. It's in the realm of thought experiments. Question from Becca. What was the movie's budget? Were there any investors? Has it turned a profit yet? And how much profit do you expect? My answer to this is, as I was saying earlier, these are very, very rough times in independent filmmaking, especially independent documentary filmmaking, where we don't have stars attached and things like that. If I had Harrison Ford narrating this, okay, maybe we could look at a profit, but no, this movie will not turn a profit. What was the movie's budget? All in, it was around $110,000, $120,000, $120,000. Were there any investors? No, the movie was crowdfunded, but these were not investments. Okay, there's not money due back to people out of the profits. The movie is still very much in the red. I understood that going in. I was prepared for it. I was satisfied to proceed on that basis. Will it ever break even? I tend to doubt it, but it doesn't matter. I mean, this is what I do for a living. This is what money is for, is to get information like this out there. That's why I do what we do. That's why Skeptoid Media exists, is because we don't make money off of any of our programming. It's all private grants and donations from people who believe in the importance of this. This is mission-driven work. This is not profit-driven work. So the specific answers to your question, Becca, no, there were no investors. No, it has not turned a profit yet. How much profit do you expect? 0. If there was any, then that would pay for some of my time that I spent. But if that happens, great. If not, no problem. I'm on salary from Skeptoid, so not a problem. Question from Ray. When friends discussed the congressional hearings last year, they were very easily compelled by everything they heard. Yeah, I understand that. They discussed all the things rapid fire that, quote, can't be disputed. I find this difficult to be the lone dissenting voice against a people who want to be compelled instead of to think critically about what was said in the hearings. I also find it difficult to address all this compelling evidence, compelling in air quotes, when it's given so quickly and I can't remember enough context why each point is not that compelling. What are a few key takeaways from the hearings which are easy to digest and can be presented in a conversation against rapid fire evidence? Well, that's a long question, and an important one. Key takeaways from the hearings. I mean, these hearings have just been kind of embarrassments of the human intellect. I mean, this most recent one, and the one that arguably got the most media attention, was with the 2 pilots. I mean, okay, 3 guys who are longtime career ufologists first, second veterans. 2 of them had been Navy pilots, and the third had worked, David Grush, had worked in Afghanistan, looking at aerial photographs and saying, that looks like a tank, that looks like a missile launcher, whatever. And generally, they were presented as, hey, these are people who are from the military, and since they say aliens, that means they got that information from their military experience. No, it doesn't. If you go to the military and say, who believes in aliens, you're not going to see any hands go up. But if you go to a UFO conference and you say, how many people in here are veterans, you're going to see the same percentage you see anywhere else in the population. You know, what is it? How many people are veterans? That's a great question. 15%, 20%? That's a rough estimate by me. That's how many hands will go up at the UFO conference. It's then easy to find people who are ufologists first and veterans second. And that's exactly where these 3 guys came from. David Fravor, David Grush, and Ryan Graves were the 3 whistleblowers. And they came up and they told UFO stories. David Grush told UFO stories that had been hilariously debunked for decades. He mentioned Roswell, for God's sake. And then he mentioned this 1933 Mussolini UFO, which was a proven hoax created by a mentally ill American man. An American man who presents as mentally ill. My wife would be quick to correct me there. I think David Grush is just an honest, well-meaning guy who is extremely gullible when it comes to anything that confirms his ufologist beliefs. When you ask what are the few key takeaways from the hearings, which are easy to digest, it would really be that. Would that be that these are people, they bring ufologists up to testify in front of Congress about old debunked UFO stories. There's really nothing more to talk about when you realize that that's what's happening. And the really hilarious thing was that during that particular hearing, who was sitting right behind the 3 guys? I don't know if a lot of people noticed it, but it was Jeremy Corbell, who is a UFO YouTuber, and George Knapp, who is the Las Vegas-based UFO reporter who has been, I mean, a major driver of ufology in the media for 40 years. I mean, it's embarrassing that this actually made it into Congress and on television. The whole provenance of this thing was just such a circus. Okay, I'm getting repetitive, and I'm sounding negative. I hate to sound negative. All evidence to the contrary. A question from Sandra. By the way, everyone, please keep commenting. I love your comments. Jeff Wag says 6% of U.S. population are veterans. Thank you very much, Jeff. Please keep the comments coming. Like I said, I've got a friend who is watching all these, and any that are a question for me to answer, he is texting them to me. So hopefully I will get to them. And if you hear dogs barking, that's my daughter's dogs, and they're insane. Question from Sandra is, oh my God, did you really get hypothermia, or is that just a PR stunt? Thank you, Sandra, for your faith in me. I really did get hypothermia. It really did suck. And I have told this story so many times in so many places. I am not going to repeat it. I will not torment all of you. If 10 people put in the comments, I haven't heard that, I will retell it. Otherwise, I'm going to assume you've all heard it before. Yes, I did get hypothermia in the desert, and it did suck. Question from James is, where is the movie? A lot of people have said this. What I've always done is whenever anyone's asked me, where can I see the movie? I've said, go to the website, theufo.movie. Whatever options there are will be right there, very obviously on the homepage. So since it's been released in August, I think I said earlier, it's really only been available on Vimeo for the general public to rent. That's worldwide. And anyone who donated to the movie, of course, they got a private download link. They basically got to watch the same version that the film festivals have shown. Interesting sidebar, the film has kicked ass in film festivals. It has done very, very well. 2 all-out wins for Best Documentary and Best Director. I dispute the Best Director. I do not deserve that. And a whole bunch of honorable mentions and finalists and all that, and 9 or 10 official selections for legit film festivals that are hard to get selected for. So it's done very, very well in film festivals. I'm optimistic that might translate into YouTube success and more people will see it, but we'll see what happens. So James, the answer to your movie is always go to theufo.movie. You can rent it as the only link there. As of Friday, there will be a link to watch it on YouTube. And I did find a back door to get it onto Amazon, but that's probably only going to be US and UK. Not great, but I will continue to work to get it on as many possible streaming services as I can. As will Film Hub. They make a little bit of money if they can get the movie placed anywhere. Okay, another question from Rob. I think this is the same Rob, in fact. What was the most fun or interesting or otherwise memorable interview you've done about the film, and why? Oh my God. Quick sidebar. I got a million podcast interview requests from, this is more of a comment on the state of podcasting right now. So many podcasts are called the Your Name Here show or the Your Name Here experience. Everyone thinks they're going to be the next Joe Rogan. And whenever I got one of these, I did look at the show. Very few of them had done more than 5 or 10 episodes. Very few of them had any reviews at all, except maybe 1 or 2. Those I did not do. I try to help out podcasters as much as I can and do as many interviews as I can if it'll help them. But I mean, honestly, I'm not gonna do social media posts and promote my appearance on a show that makes me look bad, because a lot of these guys are terrible podcasters. If you're considering starting a podcast, Do not name it the Your Name Here show and make it just an interview show, and the only theme is, I interview interesting people. That has been done literally 4 million times. You are not going to be the next Joe Rogan in all probability. Come up with something unique that's only you can do. Where did I fly off the rails and go off on that rant? The fun or interesting, otherwise memorable interview you've done. So that was in October, and it was at the SEI Institute. There is, when the SEI Institute, SETI.org, told me that they wanted to feature my movie as their movie night. They actually show a movie online since COVID, which is not the greatest way to watch a movie, but it's better than nothing. And they told me they had more than twice as many people tune into that than to any of their previous movie nights. So I was amazed at that. When they told me SETI wanted to feature the film, that was the only measure of success I needed. That was beyond wild success for me. I am so thrilled and excited that the people from SETI watched the film and said, yes, this is the kind of science education that we need to have out there, to the point that we're going to feature it and put our name on it. So I am incredibly honored and stoked that they did that. Excuse me, the hosts were senior astronomers Seth Shostak and Frank, it's French. Frank, I'm going to get your name wrong. Marchus? I'm sorry, I don't know French. Both wonderful guys. The three of us stayed on and answered questions for probably half hour, 45 minutes. There were something like 400 or 500 people in the chat asking questions, which was amazing. And then Frank had to go, so he gets off. Seth Shostak and I stayed on for another 90 minutes past that, until Seth said, I got to go to bed. It's like midnight and I'm 195 years old. Good night. But the fact that he stayed up for 90 minutes with me was amazing. And I stayed on for another, 20, 30 minutes trying to run it by myself, but I couldn't figure out their streaming system, and eventually we got off, but it was fantastic. So that was it. That's the answer to your question, Rob. It was SETI. Here's a question from Eliza. Why are you putting it on YouTube? Doesn't that mean you won't be able to make any money from it? Well, I've already answered this in large part, because it just wasn't showing up for free on any of the major streaming services where a huge number of people would be able to watch it easily, conveniently. This way they can. Every smart TV has a YouTube app, and it's easy to sit and watch a movie on YouTube. They are going to be ad-supported. That's imposed by YouTube. I can't help that. I apologize for that. I wish it wasn't, but it is. Doesn't that mean you won't be able to make any money from it? Effectively, yes. YouTube right now, for a small creator, which is me, I am not Mr. Beast, $1 or $2 per 1,000 views. So if 1 million people watch the video, would be $1,000 or $2,000. That's not even rent money for 1 month for 1 million people watching it. So effectively, yes, it means I won't be able to make any money from it. But again, I go back to, I'm on salary from Skeptoid. I don't need to make money from it. It would be nice to have the time that I spent, because that was outside of Skeptoid, paid for, but I don't expect it, didn't expect it going in. It would be gravy, but I'm fine. It's more important that the movie get out there. Mike's question: are real alien visitors impossible? When you consider speed of light limitations and the vast distances of space and the odds against the evolution of intelligent technological life, can we just say this isn't going to happen? Okay, complicated answer. The answer is obviously, no, we can't say it isn't going to happen. But for all practical purposes, I say it isn't going to happen. And I don't think any astronomers are losing any sleep over worrying it's going to happen. I liken this, my favorite analogy is Elvis sightings. People still report Elvis sightings. The FBI, there's a site, blackvault.com, run by John Greenewald, who's kind of the master of Freedom of Information Act requests. He's got the FBI's file on Elvis sightings, is on that website at the Black Vault, and you can read it. And, you know, if someone calls the FBI and says, hey, I saw Elvis, the FBI has to log that, and they have to write it down. Some nut called and said he saw Elvis. So it gets into the FBI files. It gets put out in a Freedom of Information Act request. And now you can say, oh, the FBI thinks Elvis still exists. No, the FBI has to list it because they have to report what people call and report to them. We know Elvis died. There is absolutely more than ample evidence that Elvis Presley, the human person, died, and nobody else, and was buried at Graceland and was examined by medical examiners, and a dozen doctors were there and signed their names to it, and he laid in an open casket in state, and 1 million people walked by, and he's the most recognizable human on the planet. Elvis is dead. We know that. We do not need to investigate Elvis sightings. We do not need to say, well, that sounds pretty compelling. Uncle Bob is a very reliable guy and he would never make something up, so we should check that out. Maybe Elvis is still alive. No, we don't do that because we already know, period, Elvis is dead. Whatever this person reported as Elvis is not Elvis. It's really the same, to all practical purposes, it's really the same with UFO reports that people think are aliens. If aliens could get to the Earth, we would see evidence of that everywhere because it would have happened 1 billion times considering the size of the universe. We do not have any evidence that the Earth has ever been visited. And because the laws of physics tell us by everything we know that they never will, and we will never visit another planet, we can be pretty sure that there are no aliens visiting the Earth. So when we get a report of alien visitation, sure, it's a UFO. We don't know what balloon or airplane it might be, but it's probably that. We know it's not an alien visitor. So, yes, I think that, and again, this is a practical answer, not a logically valid answer. I think we can say that this isn't going to happen. Okay, that's the end of the questions that I had pre-written down. So let's turn to the chat window here. Let's see what Will has been texting me here. Question from Buys. What was the biggest challenge to making the film besides funding? Ha! The biggest challenge in this filming was it was self-imposed. I thought it would be a fine idea if I saved a bunch of money by doing a lot of the shoots myself. Sometimes I would have local people that I had hired to come out and help. Sometimes I took people with me, and sometimes I did the entire shoot all by myself. Terrible, terrible, terrible idea. Do not do that. The biggest challenges were technical. I actually had to fly to Denver a second time because one of the cameras that I'd set up ended up putting itself out of focus, and I had to go back and reshoot that entire interview. So it was a self-imposed challenge, not having enough people on set, in a misguided attempt to save some money. 2 questions from Susan Gerbic. Hi, Susan. Great friend. Are you sick yet of the they comments you constantly get? Didn't we answer that earlier? Are you hearing from people whose minds are changed? No, I'm not sick of the they comments. I wish people would go to the website, but I understand that they don't. Am I hearing from people whose minds are changed? Again, due to the very limited distribution, very few people have seen it and had the opportunity to get back to me. I did hear from one person who had never heard of any of this. They seemed a very decent, normal, skeptical person who, like most people, has not had any exposure to this. You know, most people go through their daily life. They work at their realty office or whatever it is that they do. They don't think about these things. That doesn't mean that they're dumb, that they don't understand the true explanation for a lot of UFO sightings. It means they have other things in their life. And I heard from one person who wrote me a big long book about this was fascinating. It opened my mind up. I'd never known any of this. I'm thrilled to learn it. It's very exciting. So I wouldn't say I've heard from anyone whose minds were changed, but I have heard from people like that. And that person, I think, is the perfect target audience. Someone whose mind is open to learning and who's interested to learn. And because they live in this world and their TV channels are Nat Geo and History, they don't have any good information. They have a bunch of misinformation. So I loved hearing that. Question from Dan Reed. Hello, Dan. What do you think about MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network? This is interesting. So MUFON has been like one of the biggest organized membership groups for UFO believers for 75 years, 50 years. I'm not exactly sure. A long time, though. A lot of cases where I'll read about a UFO case from the 1950s or 1970s or something really old, it'll talk about the MUFON investigators who showed up on site. And what always impresses me is how incredibly thorough these people were. I would read pages and pages of the investigation they did, the people they interviewed, the samples they collected, and they would always come up with the wrong answer. They would do so much work and always get it wrong. The perfect example, the best example of this is Aurora, Texas, where there's an alien who's said to be buried in the cemetery because I don't know the date, I'm just going to throw out a pretend one, 1890, a spaceship came down and crashed into the judge's windmill and destroyed his flower garden, and the alien flew out and he was dead and they buried him in the town cemetery. MUFON showed up in, I want to say the 1970s, but that could be wrong as well. And they had people combing through the dirt, collecting every little imaginable little object. And I see the comments going by. I'm quickly glancing to see, is anyone filling in these facts for me that I don't remember? The specifics aren't important. So the MUFON guys did so much work, and they produced like a 200-page report. And they missed the most obvious fact of all, is that when this was reported in the 1890 newspaper, it was in the satire section. There was never any indication that this was a real event. It was satire. It was a joke written by these two guys and openly presented as such in the newspaper. And that was what the MUFON people were going off of and treating it as a real incident. So that's my analysis of MUFON. A lot of work, very responsible, very thorough, to come up with the wrong answer every frickin' time. Here's a question from Lawn Chair. Are you familiar with Dr. David Meisel? No. And the American Meteor Society? No, I'm sorry, I am not. The nonprofit site for reporting and tracking fireballs. Many UFO sightings have been explained from Meteor Fireball report. I'm sorry, I'm not, but I know that that's true. A lot of cases have involved a Meteor Fireball. Usually that's the triggering event. Someone will see that, a bunch of people will see it, and then anything else that anyone sees over the next few days will be considered to be part of that event. No comment further, since I haven't heard of that person, for which I apologize. Question from Richard Saunders from Australia. Australia's top science communicator, Dr. Carl. Hi, Richard. Hi, Dr. Carl. Is very excited and will help promote the movie. and I had a Zoom with Dr. Carl. He is a lovely, lovely man. Have you considered a similar approach in other countries? That is, find the top science person. I haven't, just because I'm one human who is very busy already. And going out cold calling is something that I just cannot fit into my schedule. I always welcome anyone who can make a connection, who knows people, and who can do some of that legwork and present me with a warm hookup instead of a cold call. But I can't do cold calls on my own. Question from Nicholas Larsson. What segment of the UFO movie are you most proud of and why? The concluding 5 or 10 minutes. I spend so much time on the writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting of that. Some of you may have heard me say that I consider this film the finest work I've ever done. I still feel that way, and every time I rewatch it, I feel that way again. That's the part that I think I did the best work with. Question from Simon Fly. Brian, why do you think that the DoD doesn't just come out and give a press conference rebutting people like Grush, Elizondo, Corbell, etc.? Their silence just lets conspiracies run wild. First of all, that's not their job. The DoD is concerned with things like, Israel, Hamas, and Ukraine. And the people in Congress who are interested in these subjects, who are interested in UFOs, put full faith in these people. When this congressional hearing happened with the three guys, I'm spacing on the names of the Congress people, one or two or three of them in particular, who were instrumental in setting this up. They actually credited in their comments George Knapp and Leslie Kean, lifetime ufologists. They credited them with being instrumental in getting their interest in these subjects and making these conference hearings happen. So you're talking about true believers. You're not talking about people who are anywhere near coming out and saying that that these whistleblowers are full of it. Question from Mike. Why do people equate von Neumann machine exploration with acquisition? If there's no resource return to the original system, where is the motivation to build them? That's a great question. I think it's pointless to speculate on the motivations of aliens. We have one data point, which is ourselves. What would we do? We would love to find an alien world where there's life of some kind so that we could learn everything about it. A sample return is practically impossible for practical purposes, but data return, it's going to take 100 years for the radio signal to come back from 100 light years away, but we'd take that. We'd wait 100 years if we could get a signal from an alien civilization. Von Neumann machines are self-replicating robots that carry their own instructions. So they can build replications of themselves that can then continue and go on to build other replications. This is differentiated from Merkle machines, which can replicate themselves, but they have to receive an external signal for their instructions. That allows us to turn it off if we want to stop them from replicating. Von Neumann machines you can't control. And there's been speculation. People have written papers about von Neumann machines. If you look on this YouTube channel, there's the conversation with Fraser Cain and Richard Saunders and myself. Fraser Cain is very much a proponent of this idea that since there's so much life in the universe, in all probability, if there is anything that's possible, it would have been done 1 billion times, including the entire universe being taken over by von Neumann machines, which is logically valid. But since the entire universe obviously has not been taken over by von Neumann machines, that means there is no life anywhere, and we are the only life in the universe. that is a one perspective that some people take, including Fraser, and I was not compelled by it. But you can watch that whole interview. It's here on this YouTube channel if you're interested. Question from Steve Foray. I enjoyed your movie very much. I'm curious, did you attempt to contact any of the big names in the UFO community for your movie, like Luis Elizondo? They are rarely forthcoming. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is a science film. I say that this film teaches astronomy using the public interest in UFOs as a springboard. This is not a platform for UFO crackpots to spread misinformation. I have no interest in becoming that platform for them. So no, I never remotely considered having any of the big ufologist names in the film in any way. A question from Squatch Talk. Hello, Squatch Talk. Is there anything witnessed in the skies that is simply just unexplained? Oh, God, yes. A billion trillion UFO reports never get explained. Someone saw a light in the sky moving around. What was it? I don't know. Not enough information. The vast, vast majority of UFO reports end up with not enough information to make any kind of a conclusion. Anyway, coming up with a conclusion takes a lot of work. When the Metabunk team directs their resources at some famous case, it's got to be an already famous case for them to want to spend the time and put in the effort. And a lot of people do a lot of work on this. You can't do that for every random person who sees a light in the sky. So they're just going to go unsolved. It sucks. I'm sorry about it, but that's the way it is. As far as anything very interesting that people would have heard of that remains unexplained, I'm sure some of the famous cases are unexplained for the same reason. We just don't have enough information. We don't know what the heck Lonnie Zamora saw in Socorro, New Mexico. We have a lot of good indications. You know, it was probably a student hoax, and there's a dozen different versions of what the student hoax was. But we just don't know. There's not enough information. We've just gone 1 hour now, so we're going to take one more question. Well, maybe another one, since it took me like 10 minutes to get this thing started. I totally apologize for that. My YouTube is still spinning around saying, going live, getting ready to start. I'm delighted that you're able to hear me. God, I hope this thing saves when I stop it. I don't even know how I stop it, since it says it's still trying to go live. In fact, if anyone knows, please put that in the comments. So here's the last question from Susan Gerbic. Saunders and Carr, that's Richard Saunders of the Skeptic Zone and Barry Carr of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry or Center for Inquiry or whatever they're called these days, say that every generation needs to redo the old pseudoscience in a new format and new social media. Yeah. I mean, if you pick up a really old book on pseudoscience, on debunking pseudoscience, like something from Martin Gardner that he may have written in the 1940s, Fads and Fallacies is a great example. You pick up that book and you open it to any page, and he's talking about some product that's being advertised or something, you would have no idea that that book wasn't written this week. It is the same exact stories over and over and over again. They change the names and dates and places, but it's the same pseudoscience and the same nonsense. It gets redone and rehashed every generation 1,000 times. Okay, so let me just run my eye through the comments here really quick. Here's another question from Bees. Squatch Talk says, turn off your computer, it'll end the live stream. I don't know if I can trust that. I don't want to delete this. I don't want this to be lost. I want this to be saved. If anyone can confirm that, please do. The question is, what happened to the Infact channel? Any reason this current channel is separate? This is my personal channel. This is not a Skeptoid Media channel. This is my personal channel right here, outside of work. I am allowed to have a life. The Infact channel is still part of the Skeptoid Media network. Infact is in kind of a state of flux where trying to rehash and replace some of our, basically all of our video programming with some new content. It's just tough. We're such a small team. We're so thinly spread and so, thinly funded. But that's the basic reason. This is my personal stuff. I'm interested in the people, question from William, that report being abducted. These stories are so off the chain. Yeah. And you also mentioned Tim Burchett is the main congressman behind the recent hearing with the 3 ufologist whistleblowers. Yes, Tim Burchett, thank you. The people being abducted, I mean, there's one explanation that's a great match for many of those stories, which is that these people are experiencing a well-known sleep phenomenon called sleep paralysis. And that probably does explain a lot of them. Is any responsible skeptic claiming that it explains all of them? No, of course not. But many of the stories that are reported are such an exact match for that. It's hard to think that it doesn't explain some of them. Jeff Weig comments that April 17th, 1897 was the date that the alleged UFO landed and crashed in Aurora, Texas. Thank you, Jeff. Let's see. I like the Christmas tree example. Thank you. The Christmas tree problem, my claim that is my personal contribution to the field of alien contact or whatever you want to call it. The Christmas tree problem is the problem of time. We all understand the problem of distance and special relativity, making it impossible to travel that far. The time problem is something that people don't consider a lot. We've got, a 14 billion year old universe, and how long does any given civilization last? A couple hundred years, couple thousand years, couple tens of thousands of years before something happens. Some cataclysm, war, pandemic, there's a million things that can end a civilization. Not a million, but there's a lot. So how long does a civilization last? We don't really know. We only have ourselves as a data point. We haven't ended yet, but we've only been a technological civilization for 100 years, 150 years. The Christmas tree problem is that you imagine a Christmas tree with lights, strings of lights blinking throughout the Christmas tree. And every time a light is on, that's the duration of a technological civilization. So you've got them coming and going constantly throughout the Christmas tree over the 14 billion year life of the universe. You would need to have 2 lights come on at exactly the same time and be exactly right next to each other for those to have any hope of ever contacting each other. Well, there might be a lot of lights that are close to each other, but they're at very different times. And that dramatically reduces the chances even further that any 2 technological civilizations would ever get to meet their neighbor. And as I say in the film, that's a problem that we hate. So that's the Christmas tree problem. All right, I think I'm going to try and wrap this up. Let's go ahead and call it over. I'm going to end this however the heck I can figure out how, because it just says you're about to go live in the spinning wheel. So I hate to just close the browser window. That would suck. But I might do it. Squatch Talk, thank you. I should do more of these. People love the interaction. And you should monetize. You deserve the extra equity. Yes, I should. This is not something that you do for the giant shill bucks, though. Okay. It's over. I'm now going to close this, or something's going to happen, and we'll see what. But there's just no good options on the screen that are available to me. Okay, I'm just going to quit it, and I hope it doesn't die. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for coming.